Poilievre is facing a leadership review at his party's convention in Calgary at the end of January. And will he survive the vote is the question. What's in store for the Conservatives more largely in 2026? We'll bring back the front bench for those questions. Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Tony Clement. Tony, I'll start with you. Listening to those clips, it was a reminder that a couple of things can be true at the same time. I think it is fair to say that Pierre Poilievre's leadership of the party, his focus on an issue set, particularly around cost of living, helped drive the election results to be, a massive gain for the Conservatives. And I think you can directly attribute a lot of that to him. At the same time, it's impossible to ignore the events of the last 6 weeks, those MPs leaving, and the fact that while the party's numbers remain as strong as they were during the election as far as popular support goes, his own are distinctly behind the Prime Minister's on from a personal public opinion basis. How do you reconcile those two things?
Yeah, let me say a couple things. First of all, it's not unusual for the leader of the opposition to be lower, sometimes much lower than the Prime Minister and preferred Prime Minister. Usually when you're into a change election, that doesn't really alter until 10 or 15 days before Election Day. So I don't think anybody should be concerned about that. You're right that the bottom line numbers are fairly static. Conservatives won 41% of the popular vote in the last election, which was the highest total since 1988. There were new Canadians that voted for us in larger numbers, young people, blue-collar workers, Ontarians in Northern Ontario and Southwestern Ontario. So there's a lot of things that actually worked for Pierre Poilievre. And I've gone on record actually saying if the election was just 1 week longer, I think our message of change and of cost of living and those issues that Pierre was accentuating would have taken us over into at least a minority government. But that isn't the way it was, of course. But I think that my message to your viewers is that Canada needs Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives now more than ever. And he continues to focus on the issues that are increasingly, by that same polling that you're referring to, that Canadians are concerned about. Cost of living, cost of housing, cost of groceries, crime in our neighborhoods. These kinds of issues are the ones that the Conservatives are focused on. And I think ultimately, with a little bit of patience and not turfing out a leader immediately after losing an election, which we've done 3 times already, and that hasn't actually worked out for us, I think most partisan Conservatives want to see Pierre continue and continue to grow.
I guess the question just jumping off of that, Marco, is, and I'll sort of reframe how I initially posed it to Tony, like he is a huge asset to the party, but it is apparent through other events that have occurred since, or even the loss of his own seat, he can also be a liability. Like, how are those two things reconciled in your view, or can they be?
I'm not sure, and I think my esteemed colleagues on the panel, James and Tony, and I'm sure many members of their party are really wrestling with that question. I think James had some really, really smart insights into the distinction between, the people who are more concerned with driving a political movement as opposed to those who want to be nation builders. And there's something that Tony said that I want to pick up on, which is that there are many, many people, it seems to me, on the outside looking in within the Conservative Party that do want Pierre to succeed. And in their view, the way for him to succeed is to grow, to evolve. But in the clips that you are playing, Pierre just seems to want to resist that notion, that advice. And I think it's because he believes that steadiness and firmness and resoluteness and projecting that unswerving quality is the way that he is going to eventually rally those Canadian voters who are still out there to be persuaded. I'm not sure that is working, and certainly on the numbers as you've reported them, it doesn't seem to me that it is. So look, Christmas break holidays are always a great time to go home, have some meals, see your loved ones, kind of, exercise, do whatever it is that you do to distract yourself, and think hard about the year that is ahead. And I think Pierre's obviously got some reflecting to do.
What do you see as the challenge ahead for Poilievre, James?
I mean, frankly, it's a challenge that all opposition leaders have, which is you have to push and pull at the same time. You have to be, in our system of government, you have to be critical of the government on a daily basis, hopefully in a constructive way that gives a sense to the public that if you were in government, you would do it in a 5%, 10% better way, a smarter way, a more efficient way, a more thoughtful way. So you have to be negative all the time, but at the same time, you have to then pivot back to then presenting yourself as a pan-Canadian, bilingual, thoughtful, continental and global leader who has a vision for everybody. So you go from being negative one day to having to be this bigger voice. There's no question, I think, that Pierre has been a very successful opposition leader. And to borrow a phrase by our friend Paul Wells, he says the thing about being a really good opposition leader is if you're really, really good at it, the voters might want to attempt to keep you there. And so to break away from that and to present yourself as the CEO of a G7 country and a government, it's a very difficult thing to do, but it can be done. And as Tony's analysis reminds us, the last election was actually very close. If in the next election one of these two things happens, Pierre becomes prime minister. If one in 20 people who voted Liberal in the last election switch to Conservative, Pierre wins. If 1 in 4 traditional New Democrats who went Liberal goes back to the New Democratic Party, Pierre wins a minority government. So the margin for him to rise or fall is very narrow, but the task is in front of him. He can do it. The margin is there. He can grow. He can become prime minister. But that delicate daily balance of being aggressive and tough in opposition while wanting to be seen to be managerially competent and have a proactive, positive vision, it's a hard push-pull, and not a lot of people pull it off.
Mm-hmm. Last word to you on that, Christy, and then I want to try to get in one quick round of what you guys think the big story next year will be on this subject of Mr. Poilievre. To you, Christy.
Yeah, so honestly, I was surprised he didn't resign on election night as leader because, blowing a lead that was that big, and, when his party was depending on him, they had all this money, they had all this support, and, they ran a really good campaign. I was surprised that he decided to stick around. I think he probably would have done the right thing by his party had he given an opportunity for a refresh there. But it's quite true. When you're in opposition, you can't demonstrate that you are going to be a leader. You can only really demonstrate that you can really oppose things. And the problem that I think Canadians had with Mr. Poilievre was that he seemed like he was all politics all the time. He wasn't about leading. He wasn't about governing. He seemed like he came across like a guy who just wanted to fight. And, Trump came along and Justin Trudeau went away and Canadians decided that it was time for a serious leader. And I think it is going to be very difficult for Mr. Poilievre to be able to change the way he is thought of by Canadians. Now, he might be saved by the fact that, because James and I don't often disagree, but on this idea that the NDP will disappear, I think we very much do disagree. I don't think the NDP are going anywhere. And if Mark Carney doesn't fulfill all of his or much of his promises, if the public sector unions get very, very upset with him over time, and if some of the environmental groups decide to get behind them again, the NDP may decide that they want to wipe out that NDP vote. So he could get lucky, but I think it's going to be a difficult hill for him to climb in the next few years to look credible, to look positive, but also remain who he is and who he seems incapable of changing, the areas in which he seems incapable of changing.
Well, my own managerial capabilities are limited because I've run out of time to get to what the big stories next year are. So I will hopefully we can save them and start off the new year in January when we reconvene with your predictions. I appreciate all of you lending us so much of your time and your...
We'll wrap it up right there, gang. Aaron, Canadian Looney, that's just a quick glimpse into something that happened on Thursday evening. Oh my God, what are we going to do for 6 weeks? We'll figure it out. Like, share, subscribe, get notified, come and join us. We'll be doing live shows over the holidays. That's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. Check one of the other ones floating around here. That's it. We'll catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching this one. We're out, gang.